We are so pleased to be honoring Open Door Champions for the first time this year. These are people who have made a commitment to advancing the promise of fair housing for all throughout the Commonwealth. We will be honoring 5 people and groups throughout the course of the symposium, and we'll also get a chance to hear from each of them to learn more about their work. Our first Open Door Champion Award recipients are Boston City Councilor Lydia Edwards and members of the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Community Advisory Committee. I want to thank you for your leadership on fair housing by making Boston the first major city in the nation to include affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements in its zoning code and making Boston a more equitable community, and your ongoing efforts to make housing access more equitable. So everyone knows, as Bob alluded to, through their work, they are setting an example for communities throughout Massachusetts and really across the country to say that the days of using zoning as a tool for exclusion are over, and instead can be used as a tool for creating inclusive, welcoming, and thriving communities for all. Joining us to accept the Open Door Champion Award and to share some thoughts on the possibilities opened up by the new zoning requirements is Boston City Councilor Lydia Edwards. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you very much. I again want to echo the efforts of the Community Advisory Committee. They had and have produced an incredible report looking at the entire city of Boston, all departments, and how we all have an obligation to affirmatively further for housing. And if you know about housing policy, there is not really an aspect of our lives in city government that isn't impacted by housing policy. Our schools, our job, access to jobs, our clean air, all of those different things. And so the fact that they already led in that conversation and produced a report that we have as a city council endorsed and would love for the current mayor to adopt as a policy. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge their hard work and what they had recommended. And one of the recommendations that I took up in 2019 was zoning, and to directly connect affirmatively furthering for housing obligations with zoning. And I'm going to just back up. I know a lot of people are housing experts on here, but there are a lot of people who aren't. And let's just explain the very crux and the reason why zoning is so important, and also what our interesting relationship has been with zoning. Specifically, zoning is at its very core essence about the public welfare. And that we should always remember, actually, it was a Supreme Court decision in 1926, is that it's part of the police powers of local government to care for the public welfare through zoning. And that is what we need to remember. And that is why it is so important we use zoning appropriately. And what we have also seen, unfortunately, in the history of zoning is that it has been the most effective tool at segregating our communities. It has been by far the most effective way to undo progressive, aggressive federal protections or even statewide protections. It has been the welcoming entity, if not enhancing, of white flight. It has made sure that we have concentrations of poverty. It has made sure that it's harder to access jobs. And for many people of color, I think just in Massachusetts, there's an additional 2 weeks added on to or taken away from our lives when we're commuting to work. Zoning. So when we talk about affirmatively furthering for housing, which was part of the original FHA Fair Housing Act in 1968, and was basically left dormant until the Obama administration decided to come up with regulations in 2008. We're talking about taking meaningful actions to remove obstacles to opportunities. And that's the definition that we chose to use in the local government's version of affirmatively furthering for housing. But why zoning? Because it's uniquely positioned in a way to get to private actors. You know, I think it was a prior speaker who talked about state level adopting a policy, or that the federal government has gone back and forth on this and so on and so forth. But what you'll find consistently is that governments, and especially the Supreme Court, has so deeply construed our federal policy and civil rights to really follow the money. In too many cases, to follow the money. So you take federal money, therefore you have federal regulations. You take state money, therefore you have state regulations, right? So what if you don't take them? What if you're just dealing with a town that has some restrictive covenants and they didn't have federal money? That's where zoning comes in. we can get to private actors in a way in housing that, you know, if they don't accept your money, federal money for a triple decker for a 9-unit building, then what are we saying? It's those thousands, little thousands of cuts that can actually destroy a community. So zoning was key. Zoning has been the injuring party for far too long. Zoning therefore needs to be the party that is healing. It absolutely had to be. So I want to tell you a little bit about how this process would work in Boston. First, it requires that we be honest. And this could work in any city. It requires that you be honest. So the first thing that the city is going to do with the developer is say, we're going to give you a report, their historic exclusion report, or a displacement report. We're going to be honest about what's going on here. What you purchased isn't just in 2021. You purchased 1991, you purchased 1971, and all the drama and issues and concerns that come from those moments in times. Not only have you purchased that, but you've also invested in the future, 2031, 2041. And we need to make sure that we're clear in how you have invested and bought in this community. Number one. And so that report comes from the city of Boston to explain you've bought an historically exclusive area or you've bought in a place that's dealing with a displacement crisis. We require the developers to do a firm, several pages long assessment tool. Tell me what you bought. Tell me who lived there. Tell me what the rents were. What are the rents going to be? Did you require the building to be delivered empty? Did you require that it be totally demolished? What did you put up for this? Are you getting rid of the only laundromat in the neighborhood? Are you getting rid of the only bodega or grocery store in the neighborhood? And what are you replacing it with? Are you taking Market Basket and giving us Whole Foods? We're next to the largest housing development in New England, which is in Charlestown. Your SNAP benefits don't go so far in Whole Foods. These are all questions that we're demanding now the developers be honest about. So we can't, as a city, say, who knew? Who knew? We're not going to be ignorant or blind to what we are supporting and zoning and permitting anymore. So we have all of that. You take your, you have the reports of what's really going on, the mirror, if you will. You have the assessment tool, and they're being honest about what they're buying. And then we take that and it goes to a committee. Actually, before they do that, they have to then come up with a list of mitigation. Mitigation traditionally in zoning in Boston, I don't know in other towns, has been give a couple dollars to make some flower pots, help out the Little League team, maybe put on a little bit of, or like, you know, we want to fix this curb cut. We want to do all these little things that actually are, when done without analysis, can actually increase inequities. You can end up with an area of town just looking more beautiful because they had more development there, and they're cleaning up that area and leaving the other parts of East Boston, for example, completely untouched. You can actually increase inequity that way. So we actually came up with a list of mitigation. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's one that will continue to grow because oppression and social inequities grow creatively. So must our responses to them. And that list includes increasing the affordability, right of first refusal, creating a fund, for example, in the neighborhood that is a displacement fund that the neighborhood will use to help people with rent. All sorts of different ways in which we're coming up with things. Policies that we can't pass at the State House, no offense to the State House, but policies we can't pass there, we're encouraging developers to adopt in their buildings. All of these different things we're coming up with. We require them to pick one of them in one of the top lists, and then we want them to, of course, pick more than that. And then all of that package, the issues in the mirror, right? Their assessment of what they actually bought, and then their proposed solutions or mitigation as a packet now go to the internal committee that we created, which is internal, includes the law department, fair housing, includes D&D and all these other folks in the city of Boston. They then will assess if you've actually affirmatively furthered fair housing. And if you haven't, we'll encourage you to go back and try again, and try again, and try again. And you won't go beyond that committee, or you won't get the committee's recommendation to get a permit. There is a deadline, and you can say this is the best we have, and you can take the risk of trying to go and get approved without that committee's recommendation. But to be very frank, I don't think that that's a good thing, and it isn't what I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think you're going to get your permits, essentially. I want to be clear though, this isn't an extra special thing. This is what zoning's supposed to be doing, acknowledging injury and creating healing. It is about the public welfare. In Boston, just like every other city and town, there is an injury of racial segregation. There is. There's an injury of classism and exclusion. There is. I don't say that because I'm negative. I'm saying that because that is a fact. And when you will not fix that fact, if you are not honest about it, how it happened, and also you will not have hope about how to solve it if you do not acknowledge it was through our hands that we caused harm, it will be through our hands that we caused the healing. If you act as though it's something that we couldn't do anything about, that's exactly what will happen, nothing, because we can't do anything about it. So it requires, and this is the one thing that I really do appreciate about this process, we're creating toolkits so that the community can be part of this conversation as well. So the assessment tool, the reports, all of those will be made public throughout the process, almost like a timeline, a dot, 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 dot. One of the things that we did not get, but I think I will be advocating for, is that there is a community member on the committee. But there's part of the politics, and we can get into that as to why we needed to get it done. The committee will be meeting with and the community members, and of course with the advisory committee on a regular basis. That is also a transparent, continued conversation. So I bring all of this up to say, this is something that every community can take, and with their own special sauce and pain points, which every community has, you will hold up your own mirrors, you will have your own analysis, you will have your own mitigation, and you will push forward your own healing. And that is why I think I'm very excited about this. Now, of course, I support a statewide kind of movement and analysis, but my concern, not even concern, just remember, and too many times, one, it depends on who the executive is of the country and of course of the state, how aggressively they're going to pursue it. And oftentimes it's too connected to the funding that comes with it. So if you want to get down to the minute little, what do they call them? Minor aggressives or small points in which we slowly rip apart our civil rights, you're going to have to get down to zoning. You're going to call on your city councilors. We just had a great talk in Andover. I've had the same talk in microaggressions. Thank you, Carrie. Microaggressions. Yes, those microaggressions, that's how we've done it in zoning. Zoning is a microaggression for a lot of these things. So we've talked in Andover, we've talked in Worcester. We're going to continue to talk throughout the Commonwealth about this specifically, and how each town needs to take the agency to lead in this. But also we're talking, of course, about the statewide legislation for the Homes Act to seal eviction records. But this is about healing. I'm hopeful. And I think every town needs some healing. So thank you. I know I'm over my 10 minutes, but thank you.
Councilor Edwards, you could stay all afternoon. We are incredibly inspired. Thank you for really putting people and community and setting into zoning and setting the example for all of our communities. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to working more with you on this and getting this going in other communities. So thank you.